The Boston Celtics have made Jaylen Brown the highest paid player in the history of the NBA with a $300 million supermax contract. But the question today is he worth it? A two-time All-Star, a guy that just made his first All-NBA team, a player that may or may not be a top 20 player in the entirety of the NBA, someone that's never been the number one option for a really good team, someone that's had injury issues over the last couple of seasons, but is still just 26 years old and has a lot of room for improvement and has shown throughout his career he will continue to improve. Is that guy worth the biggest contract that has ever been handed out in the history of the NBA? Well, first and foremost, let's get the obvious part of this out of the way. It's really funny to talk about on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. Jaylen Brown has real issues going to his left hand when he's driving to the basket. I could probably spend this entire video just showing you clips of Jaylen Brown turning the ball over, going to his left, or losing the ball going to his left and then going back to his right to try and make up for it. It's a real thing. It might not be as real of a thing as you might see around social media where it is a little bit overblown, but there are some real concerns here, not only in terms of his ability to go left, which yes, is funny, but generally speaking, it's a symptom of a larger issue for Jaylen Brown, which is a lack of playmaking that results in turnovers. Because let's be honest, we can talk about him being a two-way player, which we're going to talk about later, but when you're paying someone $300 million, you're paying them to be a top-level, all-NBA level offensive player. Not an all-NBA level scorer, an all-NBA level offensive player all around. And Jaylen Brown just is not that player at this moment in time. I will give him credit and say that throughout his career, he's worked extremely hard at improving his game, and I have every reason to believe that he's going to continue to improve going left, just like he's improved his jump shot throughout his career, his ability to get to the rim throughout his career, his athleticism. He's worked extremely hard. He'll work on this. But right now, when you're making the decision whether or not to pay Jaylen Brown $300 million, the turnovers, the playmaking, the lack of a left hand is a real concern and a real issue. And as funny as the lack of a left hand thing is, I think the playmaking and the turnovers are really the bigger problem here. Because from the moment that Jaylen Brown got to the league and started to do a little bit more stuff on the ball, he's always had this like tunnel vision issue where like his mentality is to score first. It's to get to his spots, get to his pull-ups, get to the rim, and that's great. Like you want that guy that's as talented as he is to be incredibly aggressive, but the vision is just not there. And again, when you're paying someone this much, the idea is to be the engine of a really good offense, and Jaylen Brown is the engine of a really good offense individually, but as a team, the team just does not function as well when he's in that tunnel vision mode, which is like 90% of the time, which then results in not only a lack of playmaking, but a real problem in terms of turnovers and not being able to go to his left. Now, the other issue here is that if you're not an elite playmaker and you're a really, really good individual scorer, you'd also hope that there would be some high-level defense stuff added in here. A comparison that has been used for Jaylen Brown throughout his career has been someone like Paul George, someone that's not good enough to be the number one, like alpha, Luka, LeBron level offensive player in terms of just the focal point guy that can create for himself as well as others. But they make up for that by being a really, really good top-level defensive player. But they both kind of followed similar arcs, where at points in their careers, they were outstanding defenders, but both of them, as they got older and became better offensive players, fell off defensively in a relatively significant way. And that's kind of where Jaylen Brown finds himself right now as well. And again, that just limits your value overall when you're talking about a player that's making $300 million. Now, I did mention this earlier, but I want to reiterate it. Jaylen Brown has worked incredibly hard throughout his NBA career. He was such an unbelievably raw prospect when he came into the league. And as a jump shooter, as an overall offensive player, as an athlete, all this stuff, he's improved tremendously. And I would expect that the left-hand stuff and a little bit more focused defensively, all that stuff will get better. But the real question is he worth the $300 million? Was this a good idea for Boston to give him all this money? No, he's not worth $300 million. Was it worth it for Boston to give him all the money? Yes. Because quite frankly, they didn't have a choice. The way the Supermax is set up is to keep players on their initial teams by offering them more money. And once you become eligible for the Supermax, like Jaylen Brown did by becoming an All-NBA caliber player and making All-NBA teams, for the most part, with few exceptions like Rudy Gobert a few years ago, once you're eligible for the Supermax, you get the full Supermax. That's just how it works. And the alternative was potentially insulting Jaylen Brown by not offering him the full Supermax, and then him leaving for absolutely nothing in a year and being unhappy the entirety of this season. So from a value perspective, $300 million right now in this moment is too much for Jaylen Brown, but the Celtics pretty much had to do this anyway. And as the cap continues to go up over the next couple of seasons and Jaylen Brown is making $60-something million a year, the other stars around the NBA, the true top 10 level stars, will also be making $60+ million a year because the cap will continue to go up, and this deal probably won't look as bad as maybe it looks in the moment a few years from now. But the bottom line for Boston is that this is an overpay for an imperfect player. Jaylen Brown's very good. There's a reason he made an All-NBA team. It's not an accident that he made an All-NBA team. He's probably a top 20 player in the league. Maybe you can make the argument that he isn't, but he's at least close. And generally speaking, if you're in a contract year and you're a top 20 player and you have a really good season and you're eligible for the supermax, you're going to get paid a ton of money. That's just how it is. But he's definitely imperfect, especially as an offensive player, potentially at times damaging to your offense. Now, the counter that I would make to that I'm sure some people are going to bring up, is if you go back to the 2022 NBA Finals, Jaylen Brown was really, really good. He was arguably the best player that Boston had in the finals. Jason Tatum was hurt. Jaylen Brown's had some injury issues throughout his career as well, but he was awesome. Like, he was getting to the rim, he was getting to his spots, he was scoring, and looked like the most confident player on a Celtics team that, especially for the last couple of games of that series, really kind of shied away from the moment. And that was a huge series for him. But if you go back to some of the points that I made in the beginning, lack of playmaking, not being able to go to his left, tons of turnovers, look again at some of these clips that I'm showing you from the 2022 finals. A lot of those things do pop up. Even when he's playing well, even when he's making shots, he can still at times be a damaging offensive player. And then when he's not making shots, things can look really rough and he can look like a really, really overqualified role player out there sometimes. And so the truth to all of this is that we're not quite sure yet. We're going to see over the length of this contract if Jaylen Brown is actually worth it. If he improves as a playmaker, if he improves going to his left hand, if he improves in terms of limiting his turnovers, getting back his focus defensively, being more of a team offensive player. If he gets better at all those things, then the Celtics probably just got a bargain, and they're going to have these two big wings that they've had for years, and they're going to continue to have success. I think it's important to keep in mind that Boston makes a lot of playoff runs when these two guys are healthy, and despite what was a very weird season for them last year in Joe Mazzulla's first year, they still were very successful, and they still very easily could have made the finals for the second straight year. And we can make fun of Jaylen Brown for all of his flaws, but he's still a very, very good player. He didn't make an All-NBA team by accident. But whether it's in Boston or maybe in a year or two, he decides to request a trade, he wants to be a number one option in Houston or some other situation, I do have real questions and real concerns about what number one option Jaylen Brown looks like, about the engine of an offense version of Jaylen Brown, where he's running all the ball screen stuff, he's running all the isolations, everything goes through him, especially at the end of games when the pressure is 100% on what Jaylen Brown can create for his team. I have real questions about if he's providing $300 million supermax level value in those situations. And there are players around the league right now that are on supermaxes that are not going to provide that value either. But if the question is he worth it? We're going to have to wait and see if he can improve in all of those different areas, whether it's in Boston or somewhere else. Me personally, I'm going to guess that it's somewhere else within a year or two.